will second the motion. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, so minutes are approved.
Okay. Here, Fran, you can sign.
So, wonder,
Just sign my name. Give me this.
Oh, it's me. It's me. Hello?
is it John?
John, are you coming? Okay.
You might want to tell them we're going to change the hour.
Oh,
Yeah.
are you in town? Okay, all right, we'll see you shortly. Okay.
While we're waiting for John.
He's on his way.
Microphones work?
No,
Oh.
No,
you have to speak.
I'm sorry, I also don't have a whole lot of voice right now. I'm getting it back from having been sick. So I will do my best. But if you can't hear me, really just shout and I'll try harder. We've been chatting amongst ourselves about the possibility of moving the start time for these meetings in the future to 7 o'clock because both myself and John have a really hard time getting here for 6:30 and we feel really bad about it, keeping you all waiting. So I don't know whether anybody out there has any objection to moving it to 7 o'clock or whether either of you guys have any objection to moving it to 7
I don't
o'clock,
have
but
any.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say if John were here, he'd be in favor of moving it to 7 o'clock.
I'm in favor of it.
And any issues out there? Okay.
Now, but your next meeting at the end of the month is gonna start at 6:30.
Yeah, it has not.
So from then on, all the
Tues-
meetings will start at 7?
Yeah, well, we need to talk to John about Tuesdays, because Tuesdays I think are a different thing for him, and Tuesdays are not as bad for me.
Okay.
Getting there for 6, like we don't have this problem as bad on Tuesdays.
Okay, so for.
So, and I think
perhaps-
he has another thing that he sometimes goes to afterwards, so he might not be able to move it later on Tuesday. So, but
Okay.
for these Thursday hearings, we'll move
For the
Okay.
persons.
them to 7. So,
Okay.
let's see. So one thing I can do, I think, while we're waiting for him is just let people know, I don't know how well disseminated the agenda is, but just let people know what is on the agenda for tonight. We're just going to do a sort of very, very, very brief recap of what's before us, not going into everything in detail, but just sort of brief recap. And then what's not on the agenda, but I meant to put on the agenda, was to give Valley CDC an opportunity to speak, because we ended our last meeting with public speak time and they haven't had a chance to respond. So Valley CDC will have an opportunity to speak at that point if they want. And then we're going to start our discussion amongst ourselves for a little bit, sort of, talk amongst ourselves about the site visit and what's before us. And then we have commissioned actually 2 peer reviews, one of the engineering that was done by Valley CDC, and the other is a review of the traffic study that was done by Valley CDC. And tonight we've got representative from the firm that did the peer review of the engineering here to give a presentation to us. And at our May meeting, we're going to have somebody from that firm come to talk to us about the review that they've done of the traffic study. So tonight is really a night of, we're going to start talking a little bit, but it's largely going to be a night of listening to this engineering report. And so that's where we're at. And I don't know that there's anything else we can do while we wait for John. And part of the reason that I'm being so careful about waiting for John, just so everybody knows, is that there's rules about this process, and we have to have 4 of us to make the decision, and we can each only miss 1 meeting. And so I'm really hesitant to get started and have this meeting, have him miss part of the meeting or something like that, because I want to, if somebody were to get sick later or something like that. So just so you all know.
Did you catch your cold from the kids?
No, this time I gave my cold to the kids. Yeah. Yeah, I got sick first, and then my kids got sick.
Yeah. They're gonna have it all next week when they're on school break.
Well, my kids are too little to be in school, so
Oh, okay.
we're all getting a little bit better now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I'm just glad it's a cold and not the stomach bug that seems to have been going around.
Yeah. Sometimes colds are hard to shake.
Yeah. I was talking to Edie earlier today, and she's like, "Are you still sick?" And I realized, oh yeah, I was sick a month ago, wasn't I? But no, I'm not still sick. I'm sick again.
Will she be coming to a function?
I believe she is planning to come to the next meeting.
Next meeting, that'd be good. She brings so much expertise to the, you know,
I did, I actually totally forgot.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
You have a lot of it.
But I agree that I think probably saving her for the working group and the decision writing and finance is most important.
Hey Jess, have we done anything about checking in with the city attorney about doing working sessions, whether that's
No,
still
but I can make a note to do that.
A-okay?
is our meeting goes 6:30 to 8:30?
Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll now be 7 to 9.
I know. I would say that if you need to go to 9 tonight, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to go to
Oh
9.
yeah, no. Hi.
I am so sorry.
You making me look good though. You made me look good.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So we've approved the minutes from the last meeting, so we wouldn't have to do that now. And went over the agenda, and so now we're gonna go right into it.
Mention about the hours to change.
Oh, and we decided that we're gonna start in the future on Thursdays at 7 o'clock.
But not on Tuesdays.
But, and
Not on Tuesdays.
would you prefer to start at 7 on Tuesdays as well? No, I didn't think so. 6:30 Tuesdays, 7 o'clock Thursdays.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing that's on the agenda is just a very brief recap of what is before the ZBA. After the last meeting, we did a site visit, so that experience, I think, is probably one of the things that is most prominently in us now. In addition to that, we've gotten, in response to requests that we made at the site visit, some new plans from Valley CDC with measurements on them, because we had some questions about how big things were going to be, and found it a little hard to use the plans that were before us then. So we've got some new drawings and all of this stuff. If people want copies, you may speak to Barbara about getting copies.
They're also on the website.
And they're on the website. Awesome. Let's see. So we've got we got a formal response to all of the requests that we had made from Valley CDC at the site visit, and I think one of them was also at the meeting. I don't remember the exact timing of the request, but we have a formal response to those questions that we had asked. And then we've got the engineering study that we just received today that we're going to be hearing about later in the meeting. And I think that's all the new stuff since the last meeting. And then, of course, before at the last meeting, we had a number of submissions from various interested neighbors, as well as the plan and everything from Valley CDC. And we've heard from many of the town officials who normally would sign off on regular permits if this were going through the regular process. Who have we still not heard? Is there any?
A lot of people had no comments.
Yeah,
A lot of,
I think we maybe heard something from everyone, but for many it was not.
we haven't heard from the fire chief,
Okay.
the Parks and Rec director, And the Historical Commission.
Okay.
That's it.
I can follow up if you need me to.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
I've sent them all numerous requests.
Maybe this can pound on their doors if they're
Sure.
here.
Fire, yep.
So Fire Chief, Parks and Rec, and Historic
Historical, which
Commission.
I don't really think they're gonna. yeah.
Okay.
All right, and then the next thing that's not on the agenda, but should have been on the agenda if I hadn't been doing the agenda late at night, is Valley CDC. I don't know whether you have anything. We're fine. You're good for right now? Okay. And then the next thing that's on the agenda is for us to just start talking amongst ourselves about what is of interest to us and what our concerns are, since we, as Edie keeps saying, like, we need to drive this process.
Do we want to review the?
Speak up, you guys, because there's no mics, so make sure you're.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do we
We
want to
don't want to
review?
review that probably right now because they're going to be presenting it to us, and that's like the rest of the meeting after we have our little conversation. I wanted to do an initial conversation before their presentation because what I was hoping was that before we get more information, we could talk about like where we're at from the information that we have, and then once we get more information, we can incorporate that back.
Okay.
So, I don't know, maybe you want to, I think probably for most, at least if I'm, not to project too much, but I would imagine most of us have had thoughts at the site visit, and so maybe getting started sort of sharing those thoughts with each other and what.
Yep.
So I nominate you to go first, John.
Chief, thanks. All right. Here's some items that I've just written down that we just need to discuss. One was a long-term plan, if any, to switch this from rental to ownership, and who ultimately owns it and is responsible for the upkeep.
Mm-hmm.
And what plan is there, and what repercussion, shall we say, or what stay does the city have in how that's done?
I think you guys are here, so can you answer that on the spot?
Or do we want to answer that, or do we just want to?
I think that kind of a question is basic enough that we might want to just get an answer right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
So the switch from ownership.
Can everybody hear Joanne, or
Not really.
maybe if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium just so that people can hear you, that would be great.
They're televising this when they're recording this.
Joanne Campbell, Valley CDC. The switching from ownership to rental, the state is not funding any ownership projects, and they haven't for several years. All their funds are going into rental developments. So,
And
that was the question, right?
That was part
Part one.
one of that. Okay, so there's no long-term plan to switch this from.
No, no, it will not, it will never be switched to ownership.
how long is, like, I
90
assume that there's like in order to qualify for funds, there's like a period of time that it has to be held.
99 years.
Okay.
Okay. And then the long-term maintenance. I mean, obviously, we have homeowners here that are present. I mean, they understand what it takes to own a home, and whether it's a 20-year shingle or the maintenance in siding or painting or any of these things, what long-term schedule is there, and how is that going to be processed?
Well, there's an operating budget that is put together that the state looks at and approves, and there are replacement reserves that are, usually they have capitalized replacement reserves to start, and then there's monthly reserves that are contributed to the reserve to take care of long-term improvements.
Okay.
And will it be the Valley CDC that is owning and managing the property, or is it going to?
Since we're applying for low-income housing tax credits, the entity that will own the development is a limited partnership, which is comprised of general partner as well as the limited partners, who are the investors. Now, the general partner will be a combination of Valley CDC and HAP, and we are responsible for the long-term compliance, and HAP will be the property manager of the development.
Who's HAP?
HAP is a nonprofit housing organization in Springfield.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Can you, and you don't have to do this today, can you provide us with a copy of what this schedule is? And how this is laid out, and it doesn't even have to be for this project particular, if you want to provide that for another project that you've done, so we can see how that plays out?
A schedule of,
You know, what your maintenance schedule is, you know, what, and
Oh.
how this project is going to be funded long-term.
I think you mean like what's the operating budget that
What
the
the
state has
operating
approved?
budget and how that works.
Now, the maintenance schedule, will there be somebody on site that'll work? That'll be the
yes, so
maintenance manager?
there will be a part-time property manager on site. There'll be maintenance staff that will be assigned to the site. So that we have an office that we're projected to have in the community building. So, and we have also projected in the community space to have a maintenance area so that maintenance staff have a place to store materials, replace materials, as well as to have a shop to work on repairs that have to happen around the property.
Okay.
And does Valley CDC currently serve in the same capacity, like it's a GP for a partnership that is other rentals?
Yes.
Okay.
Most of the developments that we have done are non-tax credit properties, but we do have one in Northampton, New South Street Apartments, with the general partner.
But you've got other ones where you're overseeing the management on a.
Well, HAP will oversee the management, but
Okay.
Valley CDC, we outsource our property management to Home City Housing.
Okay.
That's an affordable housing developer,
Okay.
management company, and we oversee that management.
Okay.
There are 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom,
And studios.
and studio options. Who is going to dictate what the maximum occupancy is of each one of those units? And what is considered occupancy?
Occupancy is, the people sign a family or a household signs a lease? Is that what you're
Okay.
referring to? That there's
Okay,
a
but
lease?
You mean
yeah,
like-
But, you know, what's to prevent somebody from signing a lease for a unit and having 6 more people move in there with them?
Well, when people apply for the housing, they have to list everyone who's going to live there. Obviously, we do income qualifying to ensure that they're within the income limits that are for that family size. There's management on site, so people are told that this is the household. People can't come in if there's a change in household size. Someone has a baby or a child comes back or they get married, then they need to notify property management that their household size has changed.
And how often is that reviewed?
There's, for obviously when people move in, and then there's an annual recertification.
Okay.
And then there are also visits to the units. The development of the property will include a number of funding sources, and they want to ensure that the buildings remain in good repair, so they make annual visits at different times. So the low-income housing tax credit folks will come through once a year and will take, they won't visit every unit, but they'll look at units when DHCD will come through. So different funding sources usually make at least one annual visit. Property management will also, obviously, when maintenance staff go in to make repairs, they're taught to look for, extra mattresses, or, to sort of get a sense of who's living there if there's more people than what originally was set up.
Okay. What are the terms of leases that are being provided? Are they annual leases?
Yes.
Or are they month to month?
Annual leases.
They will be annual leases.
Yes.
And will, once a year is passed, will it then go month to month, or will it just, or will they have to renew for
I have
another
to-
year?
It's, I know it's got a home lease, and I have to check on that. I'll have to check.
Okay.
Just because I know it's an annual lease, I think there's some language in the home is a funding source. I think there's some language about after a year's lease, it goes month to month.
Okay, if you could check on that, please.
Mm-hmm.
And you had asked about maximum occupancy, like how maximum occupancy would be established for the different units, and you just started to answer it, but.
Believe, I mean, overall, generally, it's I think it's health and safety, was it, what code is it? Right, that it's by square footage, but normally, what we would look at is a studio wouldn't have more than 2 people, a 1-bedroom might have 3, you could have a couple and a child, but generally 2-bedroom would be
So
probably
the
not more
square
than 4.
footage is, it's sized basically to satisfy
That's correct.
and not be enough more for,
Right, so for example, there are regulatory constraints on how many occupants can be in a one bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and so forth.
Right.
Can you provide us with something in writing that tells us all the different units?
Sure, do you want it broken down by bedroom size? Like
probably be
occupants
that
per
would be
bedroom
best, so
size,
we-
or
That'd
do
probably
you
be
want it by square footage?
By bedroom size, I
Okay,
think would be best.
that's easier to do.
Yeah, I think that would be easy. That way we could, we might want to question one of them if we feel it's too large.
Sure, it's basically dictated by our funders, but it's very easy to pull that
Yeah, I'm
together.
sure, yeah, thank you.
And 2 other things that I've got concern about. Actually, I've got a few other things. The underwater stormwater retention facility, the underground. From the research that I've done, it is a more expensive type of installation, and it is a more requires more routine maintenance. And I'm just curious, what was the choice? Why was that type of unit or device decided upon versus an above-ground stormwater retention basin?
I'm going to defer.
Yeah, I'll answer that. I'm
Berkshire
Brian Darnold
Design.
from Berkshire Design. We chose the subsurface one for 2 reasons. One,
can people hear him, or we should maybe switch out?
the site is flat, so as far as pitching the water to, I assume you're talking about a surface detention basin.
Correct.
We don't have the grade change to make that work, and in addition to that, with this being a cluster development area, we didn't want standing water for long periods of time, so we pulled it subsurface to avoid mosquitoes and other issues with that, to utilize more open space. So going subsurface, because we had the soils and the deep groundwater, it was an optimal site to do it, to utilize the site.
Okay, and now I'm going to go back to the maintenance question. Is there a maintenance schedule that is?
They've actually answered that already.
Okay, they've answered that
Yeah, we've got,
with the subterranean.
oh, no, it's okay. It's only, there's
Okay.
this,
Okay.
and then a little bit of explanation on the
Issues that are,
Okay.
And we'll talk about that.
Okay. And I guess my other concern is, in one of the presentations that you did, and I think it was in like the very first presentation, you were going through a series of displays, and there was a display that you showed when tracking the road and how far an emergency vehicle, particularly fire apparatus, could get in. We're dealing with buildings that are closer than 330 feet apart, or 40 feet apart, I guess is what it is. And I'm concerned about fire extension from building to building, in that the picture that was shown was that basically a fire apparatus could come in and basically get to the dumpster location but couldn't get to whatever the eastwardmost building was. And I'm concerned about that.
Sure.
What can you tell me about that? And I don't know whether you had that slide. I believe it was in that PowerPoint that you did the first night.
Yes, and it was also submitted with the application.
Okay.
My name is Peter Wells with Berkshire Design Group. That's called a turning radius diagram. And we do that by looking up the largest vehicle that the fire department has for that particular town.
Right.
And we use that wheelbase for a turning radius. The vehicle can easily come in here, and then once it gets to here, it backs down. So it has access to this entire area around here. We went over the turning radius movement with the fire chief. He was fine with it. During the special permit application, things haven't changed in terms of the radiuses here, so that same diagram was also used. So there's more than enough access for a safety vehicle to turn around.
Okay, and now in the center, you're showing a reinforced grass median.
Yes.
Is that something that can be driven on?
Oh, yes.
And is it at the same grade as the asphalt?
Yes, it's flush. It's flush, and it's green, but it's basically pavement that has areas in it for soil, and grass can grow in it. Rather than asphalting the entire thing, we wanted to bring in some green, and it will provide infiltration, some infiltration, but it can be driven on and plowed. Yeah.
Joe, do you want to ask, since we're going to be asking the, sort of try to follow up with the fire chief anyway, do you want to, do you think
Yeah,
you can specifically ask him just,
Yeah,
to
I'm
just, instead of sending us a, I have no comment, if you could just either affirmatively state that he's reviewed it, he's comfortable that the fire trucks will have the access that they need, that would be great.
Especially in light of the proximity of the buildings.
Yeah.
Proximity of the buildings to one another?
Yes, and fire extension.
Also add that the buildings are all sprinkled. You know that all the buildings are sprinkled as well.
She just said, just so that we know, all the buildings have sprinkler systems.
I was not.
Not right now.
Can I just?
We're not right now. You can hold it. They're responding to our questions. If we have a question,
It's just directly that turning radius if there's cars
I'm
there?
sorry, no.
Okay.
There will be other times for the public to speak. Just hold it.
Thank you.
The way that they held their time when we had public speak time at the last meeting.
We have an email from the fire chief. Oh, God.
When we ask questions, you can.
Yep.
I'm sorry. It's like right.
Sorry, excuse me.
If you have stuff, you can submit it to us. And those were your. Okay. You got
I
yours?
really haven't, other than the site, on the, I'm trying
Make
to-
sure you speak up.
When we were walking on the site, when we got to the fences at the end there,
Uh-huh.
was that shrubs or a fence? I know we talked about that.
I believe that you're talking about the end.
At the very end, you know, as you're
The
looking
north
at it,
end
to
or
the north end.
The north end. So the
Was that
question.
shrubs or fence?
The question is whether on the north end, it's just shrubs or whether it's shrubs and a fence. I'm
sorry.
Oh, no.
It appears to be, yeah, on the north end, you're showing evergreen screen.
The question was, like, from the site visit, is this just shrubs or is it shrubs and a fence here? Right, this line?
Yeah.
These are evergreen trees.
Evergreen trees, but there's
Yes.
there's no fences planned for anywhere
No.
around the border.
There's an existing chain link fence behind here that's 8
Uh-huh.
feet tall.
Right.
There is some fencing on some of the abutting properties here,
Mhm.
but this is a dense evergreen screen of trees.
Was there any consideration given at all that we know of for possibly having a low fence in some parts of the area? So we walked the site, you remember,
Right.
you know, some of the.
Yeah, we talked about that too, I think, some of us.
Abutting owners to the houses there had some concern about, they were having a party in the backyard or something, and,
Right.
you know, you could see right through
So I guess
the evergreens, how
maybe-
tall.
I guess also, I mean, maybe just if somebody from Valley CDC is interested in giving us sort of why the decision was made to go purely with plantings as opposed to either a fence and some plantings or just a fence, that might be.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm going with that.
It's my cell phone.
Sure. We went back and forth with regard to screening, but the regulations in Easthampton offer evergreen screening as a way to provide a buffer. We thought it was much more natural than putting up a wood stockade fence. And since there has been some storm damage to certain areas back there, we are willing to consider adding additional screening if needed, or if the board feels that might be a concern. But just to be more natural and green versus wood fencing that also requires maintenance.
Well, it's not like trees don't require maintenance.
Oh, I know, but they're a lot nicer to look at.
I'm just curious, I don't know whether you would know this off the top of your head, but what the difference in cost is between fencing and plantings, both sort of initially, and then obviously it depends a little bit on the type of fencing, but and then like over time in terms of, you know, having to get a landscape crew out to make sure the trees are tended versus
I think the
fencing.
cost is probably more expensive for good quality trees than a solid fence. Maintenance-wise, certainly trees are going to require more maintenance initially for the first few years until they become established. So I would say that the vegetative screen option is more expensive.
Thank you. I didn't have anything additional that I picked up on the site visit.
Yeah, the topic of the
Turn off your interview.
the topic of the screening, especially, you know, in towards the back where, you know, the encroachment on the east side as well as on the north side is particularly close. One of the thoughts that we had discussed was some sort of a berm with trees on top of the berm. You know, the challenge with you know, a shrub, for lack of a better term, or even a deciduous tree is that, you know, they start out basically at your height, where you're sitting. Well, if you're in the second floor of your house and they're in the second floor of their apartment, you're looking right over top of them. But by creating a berm and then dropping back down and planting the trees on the top of the berm, it adds just a little bit more, and it helps develop a little bit of privacy
Yeah.
and separation. And I understand, you know, you're looking to have, you know, part of the community and everything like that, but I don't think that through the backyard is the best way to develop a good community.
We should talk to ourselves, not talk to them unless we have specific questions for them, because it's not really fair to like
But
put them
I'm-
on the spot and not let them
No,
answer.
but I'm you know, this was something we discussed.
Right, yeah, no,
You know,
I-
when we were at that
Yeah.
at the tour.
Although I think there was also the counter issue, at least on the, what is that, the east side?
The east side would be the
Is
right.
the problem of right now, the water from their yard, the guy that was there that we were talking to, whose house is right there, right now his yard drains onto that property, onto the Parsons Street property. So what he was saying was, while in theory a berm would be good, that might create
Other issues.
Yeah, other issues, because it is such a flat
Right.
site with like a little bit down.
Well, and
to
that obviously, that brings up a topic that multiple people have from the community have brought up.
Right.
And you made the statement that it's a flat lot. You know, there's a requirement that stormwater stay on the property for 48 hours, correct?
72.
72 hours, I stand corrected. And then from there is discharged. And now, how is that going to be discharged from that underwater or underground
The
storage vessel?
Our site is designed to retain every drop of water that hits on the site. It all ultimately ends up in that subsurface system and eventually infiltrates into the ground. And actually, because of our soil type, we're going to be able to take the entire site and it'll infiltrate around 3 hours after the stopping of the storm.
Okay. So you don't see any issue with stormwater on that site, even though it's a relatively flat site, being able to be consumed and contained within that site and not causing other issues?
This is also a question you should ask again to our peer, like,
Yeah.
this is a good one for the peer
You know,
review.
what is gonna keep, fine, we've designed, the system is designed to hold it within the system, and he said that within 3 hours it perked out, for lack of a better term. What's to prevent that now from infiltrating other people's property subterraneanly?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the consideration too about winter. What happens in the winter time? When
With
we have a
snow?
storm, freezes,
Oh.
you have your property where, we have
Make sure you speak up.
we have a large storm, and, we have ice for a week or two, and then all of a sudden, everything starts to melt. Something that we need to look at and talk about. Is that gonna work just as well as it does during the spring or summer rainstorm?
Do you want to real quick tell us if there's anything special about how it works for winter?
Well, pretty much any storm system in the winter doesn't function as it would in the spring. However, ours, because it's a flat site, and we have everything pitching toward the middle of our site, any snowmelt will, again, ultimately end up in our system and function as it has been designed. We don't anticipate any issues with stormwater, and the bottom line is there will be no water leaving our property lines from the site, snowmelt or non-snowmelt.
As well.
I had a concern about the placement of the dumpsters. I felt like, if I were the neighbor who ended up having the dumpster right by me, even though the site is as big as it is, that might be bitter making. So that's just like a little bit of a small issue, but it was something that I thought of. And then I had also asked at the site visit about the need for the on-site laundry and community building generally, which has been responded to in this. But for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, it's good to maybe check it out. But also, just for the laundromat that I had talked about that was right across the street, unfortunately, has burned down. So that's really unfortunate. But it does change that from that is a change from when we were there that we should all be aware of. And another thing that I had asked about at the site visit was just about the position of the buildings, mostly, sort of being towards the edges of the property as opposed to more in the middle. And I was told at the site visit that one of the reasons for that was to maximize solar gain, and then also to prevent the road from having it be the road and the traffic that was next to people. And so I thought that was interesting as far as like the site goes. And I think those were my main things that I was thinking about from the site visit.
I do have one other one.
Okay.
In driving around the area of this proposed location, of this proposed project, I don't see how the architecture really fits in. What's shown here. If we were to look at, that style of building right in the front, right on Parsons Street, because that's Building A, which is
Right, the one that's right on
right
Parsons
there.
Street.
Yeah, I really don't see how that is. And I guess in this day and age of of Photoshop and all kinds of things like that. If there's a way to create a panoramic picture of, you know, go down Parsons Street, take a bunch of pictures, and now let's put that building in there.
Now, is your concern,
What's it really gonna look like compared to the rest of the neighborhood?
is your concern more the shape or more the like siding material or what?
The shape.
We talked about the height too.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
the height with
Yeah.
the other building
Yeah, and we've
there?
got the new,
And we
that's,
got a
yeah.
response. I haven't had a chance to read it, but
I think there's only two buildings that are the same on that street.
True.
there's the drawings.
There's some
That's
that
no
are done better.
combination.
Oh.
One story, 2-story.
You've got 100 years worth of building on that street.
Yeah, yeah.
But-
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that like aspiring to look like the apartments that are right next door would be a good thing.
True. You know, we're not looking for, you know, triple deckers or anything like that, but.
But yeah, I don't know whether you've seen these, but
Yeah, but you know,
you
let's.
mean with the picture of what
Now
the other
let's
buildings look like.
if you're standing, you know, where we parked that morning and look across the street, what are we really going to see there?
yeah.
And we can
it is-
say we're going to see this, but is it possible to get
Yeah,
some sort of
it's a great idea because it really gives you a visual to
what's
the
it?
completed job.
Yeah,
What we're looking at.
When
This
we
is
get
what it's
done-
gonna look like.
what's it really going to look like?
Yeah. I'm sure with the technology today, some, you know, it can be done.
And any chance we can get that?
But we built a 3D model of the entire project that shows the architecture.
I think what we're specifically interested in now is having the actual pictures of what is there now.
Take a picture of what's
Like
there
as
now.
opposed to a 3D
And
of
now
what's
let's
going to
put
be
this-
there, but
Put this building
so the
about where it's going to be.
so the 3D
So what when
within
we're
a real
yeah,
picture.
you know,
that
or
make
when
sense?
when the folks who live on and you know, I'm terrible at road views. I can't remember what the back street. But Dave, what road do you live on? I'm sorry.
Pepin.
On what?
Pepin.
On Pepin?
Yeah.
You know, when the people on Pepin Street, you know, what are they really going to look at? Yeah, what are you going to see out your back door? Yeah, and that's good, but what's it really look like?
Or from the
What it
cemetery.
looks like.
Or from the cemetery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a historical cemetery.
Yeah.
But so I think the difference between that and what John is specifically interested in, it would be built like a picture of Parsons Street. I don't know that they can take a picture that with like that's going to be wide enough.
You can hook them all together. I mean,
Oh.
any iPhone can do that.
Oh, that's
so,
true. Okay,
You know,
so
the technology is
basically
there.
a picture of Parsons Street as it is now, with the 3D model of Building A, is I think
From ground level.
basically
Yeah,
from ground
yeah.
level.
I mean, those pictures are great if you're up on top of Mount Tom and looking down. But,
Or
you know,
well,
we're-
also those aren't what you're looking for because all the buildings are white.
No one has that view right there.
yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah.
You know, eye level. I guess you're calling those eye level views
Yeah.
of the entrance. Yeah. You know, what does it look like all the way along the street?
You want more context showing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
You know, how does it
Yeah.
really fit in
How's it go?
in the neighborhood?
Panoramic photograph.
You have the 100-year-old homes, and then you got this new, just like on East Street.
Yeah.
You know, you got that project on East Street.
Yeah.
You drive by it, you got a farm, you got, you know, 60-year-old house, then you got this new, the architecture that we're questioning. It's just, can we make it
right.
adapt to the area more?
I guess I'm still, I think, like, is it, I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, what is bothering other people. Is it the size, the shape, or the cladding, or all of them together? Because I'm just, like, for me, I'm thinking that what was there, like, the big townhouse apartments that are currently there, like, I don't know, maybe it's because I went to Smith College, and I'm used to the idea that there's, like, the one eyesore building and then everything else is like different varieties of pretty. But to me, like, this is just so much better than that.
And I guess I'm not questioning, you know, is it better than what is, you know, next door? Sure.
Oh, yes. No.
But
And also, like, this matches the other stuff better than what's next door. So I'm just wondering, like, to make this even
Yeah.
better, what would it be?
But I think-
different color, different shape?
yeah, I think what we need to do is we need to see it in context to
Okay.
see what it's really going to look like,
Okay.
and then say, well, can you do this? Can you do that?
Uh-huh.
And take a look at it that way.
So you're really looking at, what's going to really look at when it's done.
Right.
And I'm driving by there, and does it have these peaks? It's the only thing around that has these peaks.
Right.
You know, we know it's going to be new. We know it's going to be,
Right.
you
But
know.
what's it really going to look like?
Anything else, folks?
I don't have anything.
Okay. I think then we're gonna go into Jean. We have, if you can, just say your name and then.
My name is Jean Christie. I'm a project engineer with VHB in Springfield. And I'm also a professional engineer licensed in the state of Massachusetts. We were hired by the city of Easthampton to perform a peer review on the site plans as they pertain to particularly public safety and accessibility, pedestrian amenities and bike amenities. We are also contracted to review the stormwater management system as well as traffic stuff, and the traffic is not my forte, so I will not talk about it at all.
We're having traffic in May.
In our review, we look at the zoning code, the City of Easthampton Stormwater Management Ordinance. I think that's in the city ordinance. And in that ordinance, it is referenced the Massachusetts stormwater standards, and those are 10 standards set by the state to ensure water quality and water quantity measures are taken in projects. In review of the site plans, I think this is going to be a two-part review, as our traffic engineer will have her own opinion on some of the interior accessibility. One comment that I had made, and I believe you all have a couple memos. One is a more general memo that just briefly describes some big-ticket items, I guess you could say. And the second is a more technical memo, which really got into the nuts and bolts of the stormwater management system, which I don't know if you want to go through all that or not. It's
I think
pretty
what
just numbers.
What would probably be most helpful to us is if you're able to sort of tell us, is it constructible? Does it, I looked through it a little bit and it looked like there were some, obviously some small technical issues. But I think at this stage what we're most interested in is can it work? Because we don't have the expertise to take the details and build a picture. At least I don't have the expertise to take the details and build a picture of can it work? Will it, do its job such that any existing problems with storm water for the abutters won't be made worse? And that's, I think, at that level is mostly what we would.
I think as the plans currently are, and as the plans that we've received, we reviewed them as we received, it needs a little bit of work. There are a few items that we think are important to public safety that need to be addressed, and particularly it is in the design of the infiltration system, the subsurface system, and how that subsurface infiltration system would overflow during a large storm event. And from what we've determined from the stormwater calculations is that stormwater would not have an actual overflow, but would come back up to the surface through access ports, I believe they're with frame and grates, and it would pond in let's see, I can't even tell you, it's right in the middle of the site. There would be a pond, and this isn't, it wouldn't be there for a long time, as I think Mr. Darnold had said, that it would be a few hours, but it is standing water in a parking lot, and that is during a 100-year storm, which is a substantial amount of rainfall. But it should be noted that that is a concern of ours at the time. I think most of our other comments were, we did state that the fire department should be consulted on this. We think that there is enough access that it can be done. We just want that written statement that says we can back our truck in and that's adequate for us. Another issue is, I believe this has probably already been done, but we fire flow testing on the street to make sure that there's enough water in the street to provide enough sprinkler pressure and flow, as well as at the hydrants within the site. But I'm sure that's already been looked at, but I just didn't have that information. Layout-wise, I feel that this is a pretty good layout. There's a couple small issues with signage. I didn't see any interior directional signage on the layout plan, and we just want to ensure that there is the stop signs, advanced crosswalk notification, and there's enough accessibility through ADA compliant ramps and walkways throughout the entire site. As far as parking goes, according to code, there is 76 parking spaces. 4 of those are accessible parking spaces. There are 2 located at each accessible unit within the development. And then there's 2 potential spaces maybe over at the community center. And according to the plans that we had, those weren't actually striped, with pavement markings or signed as ADA compliant parking spaces as accessible spaces. And if the community center is to be used as a public space, they probably should have those spaces. And you can probably rearrange the 4 spaces that they currently have on the plan to fit back over there. And it's just a recommendation from us. The site plans don't reference any erosion and sediment control barriers. We would expect that would be located around probably the perimeter of the site based on grades, as well as any potentially impacted catch basins in the street, things like that. That's pretty well outlined in the Massachusetts stormwater standards, as well as in the Easthampton stormwater ordinance. And then there was just some very technical, nitty-gritty stormwater things that I think probably don't pertain to the board so much, as they're really nuts and bolts kind of thing. But
the erosion
probably
and sediment controls, just because I'm not familiar with this, what would that normally look like?
A silt fence. It's temporary during construction
it's just-
only.
okay.
Yep. And it would be silt fencing or hay bales and
Okay, now that
things like that.
I'm on I don't know. That wasn't the issue.
There is an operation and maintenance plan that was submitted within the drainage report, and there were a couple items that were missing from that. Otherwise, it is a document that will require an owner's signature and have some legs to stand on. And this is during, I believe it was during construction and as a long-term operation and maintenance plan for the stormwater system. And that would include the catch basins on site and street sweeping and the infiltration system as well. And then that was, let me just check. And then
in your review, I'm sorry, if you have more.
No, go ahead.
In your review with the storm water related issues, one of the things that I guess about this site is that it is over the Barnes Aquifer, and I was just wondering whether, in what way or how that plays into the design of the site.
Has this project been reviewed by BayPAC yet?
I believe it was under the special permit process.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay. So yeah, they would have received any information at that time about not using salt and using special fertilizers, if any, probably not. But BayPAC would definitely lay down their recommendations. I believe they are just recommendations from them.
It was also a different design at that time. It was the permeable
Right.
pavement, so.
That's, yeah,
So
so,
you need
so
to.
can it go, it would need to go back then to BayPAC, or?
It's a good question. I don't know if it has to because of this permitting process.
Okay.
But
we
I
could
think
maybe
you certainly
ask.
could.
make a
You could make a recommendation to send it to BayPAC and have them review the new plans. Absolutely.
I think in light of the fact that they didn't review the plans that are in front of us, I think we should be able to send it back.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I can get that on their agenda. So, okay.
All right.
Thanks. It was pretty straightforward. I don't think I have any other questions.
Do you give the opportunity for CDC to respond to any of the comments?
We'll just, yeah. I mean, I guess we have,
What are they?
do you want to just take like 5 minutes and like, do that before we finish up, or you could?
I'm good.
You're good, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you guys want to briefly respond, since we have a little bit of time?
I'll start off, then I'm gonna pass over to Brian.
Okay.
But yes, many of the things that Jean reviewed and brought up in the report are easily fixed. Some of them are drafting errors. Some of them are just minor tweaks to the plan with regard to the overall plan. Permitting plans aren't necessarily 100% construction drawing level, so that's why some of the things were omitted. Some weren't labeled. The 2 parking spaces next to the community building are handicap accessible. They just weren't labeled. So they were there, it just wasn't shown. So many of them were drafting type things. With regard to the first issue that she did mention concerning the underground infiltration system, I'd like Brian to respond to that.
Jean's concern is a valid one. She's concerned that in the north parking lot, we have the system designed as such in the 100-year storm, which is the most substantial storm that is generally designed to utilize some parking lot space for standing water, where Peter's highlighting right there. The reason for that is we could have had it stand there and sit there, or we could have had it overflow into the city, street, or the neighbors, and we decided to keep it on site. And it will overflow in areas that are near walkways. They will not overtop the curb, and it'll only be for an hour or two after the largest storm event, which in that case, unfortunately, everywhere in the city will be flooded, because typically public infrastructure is only sized for 10, maybe 25-year storm. So the reality is everywhere else will be flooded as well, but we have still designed it assuming that we could hold it all in. So that's the justification for that.
How deep a pond, like in a 100-year storm, would it be for that?
Well, the
for
pond
the
is-
2 hours that it will sit there.
Well, the pond itself it's 4, I think maybe 4 feet of stone, and it's buried, I think, about 6 feet down.
Oh, okay.
So it'll pond maybe 12 inches in that 100-year storm above the parking lot, and then
Okay.
after 3 hours, all the water will be dissipated into the ground again.
Now, you say it's going to pond 12 inches above the parking lot.
That's correct, yeah. There's a catch basin in the low spot, which it will taper out about 12 inches above that and then pull back in over the last 3 hours. And again, the purpose of that was to utilize that as an overflow rather than having it spill onto the neighbor's line or go back into the city infrastructure, which already has lack of capacity to take water.
I mean, if the standard curb is, 4 to 5, 6 inches.
Right.
So it's
but
gonna
the site is
overflow the curb.
sloped. So we have it designed so that it will not be anywhere near the housing development, and it will not overtop any of those curbs. It's in the lowest spot of the site, and
It will overtop this curb here and partially go out onto the common grass area. But it will not overtop anything out here next to the building.
yeah, it won't even reach the bottom of the curb.
So basically, it's 12 inches, but that 12 inches is like over a sloping area.
Yeah, it's 12 inches for a small portion of it, and it tapers up to 0.
Okay. It's 12 inches at the low spot. Layman's terms there. Town's gonna get water anyway.
Okay, where are we at for time?
10 of 8.
If she is gone because we're late. She's oh,
Who, Jean?
oh, here you
She's
are.
standing up.
Right
She moved. She.
I was thinking, since we've got a couple minutes, if there was anybody else who wanted to bend our ear for a few minutes, the podium.
On stormwater, or
Let's
would
keep
you
it
like
on
to make it
stormwater. That's
specific to
kinda what we're
stormwater
Stormwater,
only
yeah.
comments?
Sure, storm.
I'm just asking,
Um,
if you open it up.
Stormwater.
Thinking we need to keep it storm. We're talking stormwater.
Okay.
Let's keep it stormwater.
Stormwater. If you could come to the podium.
Anybody?
Anybody is
I trust
first.
you guys to work it out.
Yeah.
I've just got a couple of
Name and
things.
address.
Yeah, name and
My name is
address.
Julie Ramet. I live on Duda Drive in Easthampton. I'm not in a butter, but I have a lot of things against this going on. One of the things is, you were talking stormwater and everything, the overflow. One of the things that relates to it, wouldn't it be something like the fires or the city engineer, the project engineer that I could have her think about, or you think about, question referring to it, and it's a water issue. And that has to do with the 2 weeks ago when there was a fire on Parsons Street. There was, you talk about pressure, there was the Easthampton fire truck that was there. There was Westhampton, Southampton, Holyoke, and Northampton that were all there. Now, do all their trucks fit into this department, into this project? But as far as the water pressure was concerned, the hydrant that was in front of the Parsons Street building that burned did not have enough water pressure. They actually had to come and use the fire hydrants on Duda Drive to get that water over to there to put that fire out.
Well, that is something we will certainly.
That
we're
is
going to be following up with the fire
It's got to
department.
do with the water pressure that you had mentioned. As far as the storm drain is concerned, 12 inches, as I've said before, anybody can come in any one of our yards to see that when it rains, and it's not a 100-year storm, these are just regular storms. We get the drainage from Mount Tom going down that way. And if you come in any one of our yards on Duda Drive, we have one continuous swimming pool going right down the entire stretch. That's stormwater. And you've got that cemetery that's right next to that also, that you have to be careful of with stormwater in that respect. I have other things, but it doesn't pertain to that.
Stormwater. Stormwater? Come on up.
I have a throat thing too, so I'll be drinking some water.
Okay, and also name and
Oh yeah,
address
Doug
is
Needs Wecky,
standard.
18 Federal Street. And if I could, I'd like to give you each a copy of what I have for the boss.
Yeah.
The bosses. Right here. Have your own bosses.
Thank you.
And then you get an attachment. Some pretty pictures to look at. I'd like to talk about water quality. Talked about the quantity of the water. I'd like to point out the hazardous waste and pollutants found in parking lot runoff. And I'll be quoting the EPA. who has labeled all grease and oil as hazardous waste. This includes the toxins found in all petroleum products. The EPA has stated that parking lots contribute 80% of all ground pollution. Crankcase oil is especially toxic due to the combustion of gasoline in the engine. This burning of gas and oil creates polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are carcinogens. Other hazardous toxins are found in brake fluid, antifreeze, windshield washer fluid, brake dust, windshield de-icing chemicals, oil additives, and even the car's exhaust as it lands and settles on the pavement. As well as these various fluids leaking from vehicles, many are also liquids that people spill when adding them to their own vehicles. We can add to this list WD-40, brake cleaner, and car wash products that contain petroleum distillates. The EPA in their document, characterization of used oil in stormwater runoff in California of 2006, page III, says pollutants carried by runoff are known to have potentially harmful effects on drinking water supplies. Also, the highest oil and grease concentrations, this is them speaking, EPA, to be reported in runoff samples from discrete sources, for example, parking lots and industrial facilities. Further, the amount of used oil in stormwater runoff can more likely be attributed to leaks and spills from vehicle engines than incidents of illegal disposal. The EPA goes on to name the following products as found in oil and grease: arsenic, chromium, lead, nickel, and zinc. These substances have been associated with a wide range of toxic effects in humans, including death following ingestion of large doses and cancer in smaller doses. The EPA refers to parking lots as, quote, hydrocarbon hotspots. These toxins will be transported by rainwater, which we are calling stormwater now, which is really a misnomer. It's not just storms that create this runoff. People washing their vehicles and snowmelt into the storm scepter 450I, which I presume is the vessel being used. According to my research on the diagrams for this housing project, it is the storm scepter 450I. 450 means it holds 450 gallons of liquid, which will hold it in this basin before it enters the ground. Next, how does the storm scepter 450I work? You could look at this, and this is not the one they're using, but there are other pictures. The ladder is not necessarily part of their apparatus. The ladder is inconsequential anyway. The way this works is below the midpoint here, which is sealed off, you cannot get into that except through the inlet pipe and the outlet pipe. It will hold 450 gallons of liquid. That liquid includes all the pollutants and runoff from the parking lots and fertilizer, etc. There's what's called a weir, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, at the inlet pipe, and it's a dam which does not allow the water to flow freely over it, but it slows it down and holds it so it can drip into the 450 gallon chamber below. If this is moving in slowly, and Rinker, the manufacturer, states that 80% of those solids will settle to the bottom, which means 20% of the TSS, total suspended solids, will not settle to the bottom. Up at the top of that chamber, the oil with a higher specific gravity will float to the top and sit there until it's pumped out. So at the top it gets pumped out by this white pipe here, and the bottom it gets pumped out also at whatever the cycle is for pumping it out. But until then, that water is sitting there, and technically, according to the Rinker documents, that water is stored, which is against zoning ordinances in our city. You cannot store petroleum products below the surface. And I'll get to those in a minute. So it's a simple gravity bed apparatus, no moving parts. And there's nothing magical or mysterious about it making the pollution any cleaner. All it is doing is separating what it can separate by gravity. That's all it does. And it only begins working when the storage chamber is full, so there has to be 450 gallons sitting in here before anything goes out. And this is all found on their website, by the way. During a regular flow period, the water runoff with its pollutants enters the inlet pipe, and is slowed down by the wear, where it can go into the storage chamber below and later get pumped out by a truck. Other pollutants, and I explained this already, so they're all stored there. Even during normal flow periods, Rinker states that 80% of TSS, total suspended solids, will be captured, leaving 20% not captured. Pollutants that will not be recovered include the following: oil, antifreeze, windshield washer fluid, and chemicals that have become emulsified. The emulsification process happens with the natural flow of water mixing with oil and these other materials, as well as people using detergents and soaps. That will also create emulsification, which will not allow those chemicals to separate out. They will go with the water, and they will eventually go into the ground, above the aquifer, actually in the aquifer. The system is designed, and this is critical, so that during high flow periods, as we're talking about a 100-year storm, and not just a 100-year storm, we're talking about high flow periods, more than normal water, such as storms or persistent rain, the water runoff that enters the inlet pipe will bypass this weir. Now remember, this is designed to slow the water down that comes in, so it can trickle down in here, not trickle, but go at a slower rate, so it'll settle and never be disturbed by high pressure water. It's also designed during storms in high volume of water to go over that dam and never settle and never be given a chance. And Rinker makes this perfectly clear on their websites and the materials and their technical manuals. That water, those red arrows show that the water will jump over the weir and go directly to the outlet pipe, never having been allowed to settle. And those pollutants, again, go right into the aquifer without being allowed to settle. Add to this mix the salt that will be present during the winter as sidewalks, through roads, and parking lots will be sanded and salted. Salt has been found to be a polluting chemical in drinking water. This affects people with heart disease and high blood pressure. The polluted water will also impact residents whose basements now or in the future flood. As this water enters homes, residents will be in physical contact with it and all its pollutants. A serious problem arises because once polluted, the aquifer will not recover. 1 quart of water can pollute 1 million gallons of fresh water. Once in the aquifer, chemicals will remain, polluting more water each time there is a water movement. Laws that may be violated. While the area beneath 69 Parsons is not currently designated as an aquifer protected district, it is, according to the Easthampton DPW, a Zone 2 recharge area. Also, there are discussions with the Department of Environmental Protection that it be designated a Zone 2 recharge area. So I know people are debating that, but the fact is, we do recognize it as one in our city. And the DEP wants to recognize it as one. Perhaps in the future, we'll be designated a protected aquifer. And we really need to think ahead to that time when that's going to happen. Because if it's polluted by then, it's too late. Regardless of whether this area is technically a protected aquifer or not, there are currently over a dozen private wells that draw water from this underground area. That's down towards the river. The Easthampton zoning ordinance, section 8. And these are the special district regulations which could very well apply to this aquifer later. To promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community and to protect and preserve the groundwater resources of the city from adverse development and land use practices that might, notice the word might, I've highlighted these, that might reduce the quantity or quality of water. It doesn't say it has to be polluted now, we just have to foresee that it might be. And in the future will be available for use by municipalities. Now there are 13 private wells that draw water. Future city use will be even greater as the city and surrounding areas increase in population. Prohibited uses. This is again in an aquifer protection district, which this is not, but very well could be, and we still have to remember it is an aquifer. Storage and/or transmission of liquid petroleum, which is settling out in this vessel, is prohibited, except that the storage shall be in a freestanding above-ground container within a structure or within a basement of a structure. with secondary containment adequate to contain a spill the size of the container's total storage capacity. So if you have an oil tank on the ground, you have to have a building around it that will collect all that oil if it's spilled. That can't happen underground. If anything happens to this, the oil that is, quote, stored, and it is being stored, will disperse. They repeatedly, their technical manuals repeatedly refer to oil being stored. That's their word choice. In the top and bottom of the chamber until vacuumed out by a truck. Prohibited also 7.052E in our statutes. Prohibited outdoor or underground storage of hazardous chemicals. The EPA has already said these are hazardous chemicals. Pesticides, herbicides, or, quote, hazardous waste. The EPA has clearly said these products that will be on the driveways and roads are hazardous waste. The EPA has defined all oil and grease products as hazardous waste. We have to remember the high flow volume that the polluted water is intentionally diverted away from the settling chamber, so it will not settle. Intentionally diverted away from it and directly out the outlet pipe. That means 100% of the pollutants in that water enter the aquifer. Common sense dictates that we not pipe hazardous waste into any ground. 7.052K prohibited duplexes or multifamily residential uses except in open space residential development, which is 10 acres or more, served by municipal sewer system. There's a reason for this. Too many houses on a small piece of property who cannot contain the polluted water and the stormwater runoff is not acceptable. So maybe the waiver for a multifamily use development should be denied, because if you grant a multifamily development, you have to, by law, give them parking spaces. If you give them parking spaces, you're giving them the vehicle to collect polluted water and put it into the aquifer. The waiver overturning the one structure per lot would contribute dramatically to the same outcome. Consider future generations as well as our own, as it would be impossible to clean up the pollution over the years. We cannot dig up the aquifer and replace it after the fact, but we can protect it now. Let's be proactive and intelligent as we consider the future of our aquifer and drinking water. Let us also not forget the residents who currently draw water from those private wells downstream of this. They will inevitably be drinking the pollutants put into the earth at 69 Parsons Street housing project. We, our children, and their children could very well be ingesting the same pollutants. I want to draw your attention to page C here, which gives a really clear top view of what the system looks like. It's just a cement chamber with fiberglass in the middle, just over the 450 gallons of liquid and pollutants. And that's the weir, or the weir. The inlet pipe comes in and there's the polluted water. And that's what's backing it up, assuming it's not raining hard, or it's not a storm. As soon as it is a storm, this reddish liquid here goes directly over and out the outlet pipe. It does not go down, apparently it looks like a tube here. That's where the water normally comes up and goes out after the receptacle is full. So assuming that's full, which it has to be, and it always will be, that polluted water runs directly out the pipe with no treatment and no settlement. And the last page is another diagram which shows the same apparatus without the ladder, which is probably more like this one. And I'm pointing out that it uses the word stores a lot. So petroleum is stored underground. So my throat made it through. .336 water supply and sewerage requirements. Stormwater runoff, specifically 8.337 in our code, says prevent non-point source pollution. Non-point is something like a parking lot that does not come from an oil refinery or something like that. That's not non-point. This is non-point. To prevent that pollution from urban runoff to streams, water bodies, or groundwater. This runoff is going directly into groundwater. Stormwater runoff, 8.337.3, promote recharge of groundwater aquifers while preventing pollutants from entering groundwater. It's very clear. I have plenty about screening, but I'll wait till the review, because that
Yeah,
needs a
I
lot of
think-
time.
Yeah, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I have right to a point of information, clarification. Did you say that there would be zero collection of certain toxins and chemicals?
Yes, those chemicals aren't suspended, so they're not suspended anywhere. They become emulsified. They become, the atoms and molecules
Okay,
become part of the water.
I'm just asking for a point of clarification on that.
We have to, you can talk afterwards, and if you have stuff you want to present to us, there will be future public speak times, but we're done for tonight. And do you guys want to respond a little bit now, or respond at the next meeting?
I'd like to respond a little bit now. Yeah.
Yeah, again, water quality is always a concern. I completely appreciate
Yeah, and
your concern, especially being in the aquifer.
I want to ask you to just, I know, if you could just keep it to 5 minutes, because I want to ask our independent peer review person also to speak before we're out of time, and we're running pretty close to being out of
Sure.
time.
I mean, if she wants to go first, that's fine.
I think I'd rather have her finish us out.
Okay. As far as water quality goes for the site,
I thought she was saying that she wanted Jean to speak first. Was that what you were saying?
No.
No, I say I want her to close us out.
Oh, okay.
You should address the board. Yes.
Yeah, address us.
okay. As far as water quality concerned, we, first of all, knew the site was a Zone 2 when we designed the site with stormwater in strict compliance with the DEP standards for a Zone 2 site. And as far as water quality goes, the stormwater treatment system is only one component of multiple that we've included. We have all water that hits the pavement goes through a deep sump hooded catch basin, which sort of...
Say that again, slower.
A deep sump hooded catch basin,
Thank you.
which is a concrete structure with a 48-inch bottom that has a similar function, not as advanced, but settles out oils and solids, and there's a hood that comes down preventing oil from going out the outlet pipe. This needs to be vacuumed out once a year, inspected. You know, when it gets full, it needs to be pulled out. That right there removes about 25% of your TSS. Then all that water is directed into the stormwater treatment chamber, the Storm Scepter 450i, which pulls out another 80% of the TSS as discussed. And then actually, once the water enters the recharge system on site, we've made sure there's adequate separation from groundwater, and it's designed as a treatment system in itself, essentially almost as a sand filter, or as a septic tank would, or a septic system would. As the water percolates through, those harmful chemicals are actually reduced because a biomat actually eventually gets built up on the bottom there. So rather than achieving the 80% minimum, which is deemed safe by EPA and DEP, we're actually ultimately getting a 95% TSS removal. And the other target I wanted to talk about is with the weir within the Storm Scepter. It's designed, as he said, to overtop in larger storms, but the reason for that is twofold. One, so that the water does not enter the sump and pull out those stored contaminants and push them into the ground. And the reason that that only happens in high storms is actually all of the pollutants that get pushed through the site occur within the first half-inch to 1-inch storms, which is a very small rainfall. Any storm above that will overtop the weir, but that by then all the contaminants on site have washed through the system, so that water is actually 99% pollutant free. So the water overtopping that weir, this thing is sized, you know, using a hydraulic model of the site to ensure that we are catching that first flush, which is the portion of the water that contains the contaminants. Everything else overtopping that weir is considered clean water. So that's my response.
Thanks. And can you give us your... I know, yeah.
Yeah. In regards to what Mr. Darnold just said, I don't have much comment. I think he hit the nail right on the head. The only thing I would like to ask for is some verification calculations indicating that in not just the first half inch of stormwater is treated, but the first full inch, based on the infiltration rate that they've used. Because it's sand out there, they've used a very fast infiltration rate. And the DEP guidelines standards do require 1 inch for anything over 2.4 inches per hour, I believe. I hope I get my numbers right. But everything else he said, I agree with.
Do you know the point that was made about aquifer protection areas?
I can talk to that as well if you need to.
Okay. I was going to ask like a technical question about like, would there be design differences if it were designated as that, and what kind of scope would those design differences be?
Which speak for them. I don't know if Jessica.
If it's a zoning related issue to the aquifer, I can address that in terms of designing them.
Oh, okay.
You need to.
Yeah. I totally understand that you can't answer that right now, but
we can certainly ask for, you have a copy of a memo. We can ask her to revise that memo maybe a little bit. And if there is something specific that you...
Okay, we'll talk to you about the zoning and then we might ask to have it revised. I would be interested in knowing what changes, if any would need to be made if that designation got changed.
You also have BayPAC, who, they are the experts in terms of the aquifer, and they have a whole development review process.
Okay.
So I think if you've got some very specific questions about...
So we're sending it back to them anyway. When we send it back to them, can we ask them how their recommendations would be different if this were designated up
a higher level?
Yeah.
Yes, my understanding with the aquifer, and I don't want to speak for BayPAC, but my understanding is that there's a northern section that is possibly being considered. Some of the issues in regards to the modeling of exactly where the aquifer lies, there's different calculations of where it's located. If you go to the BayPAC website, you'll even see that there's different maps showing where the aquifer is. And so there's also some understanding that there's more clay soils in the northern section of the aquifer than in the southern section. For the city of Easthampton, we have an aquifer protection overlay district. It's for the southern section of the city.
And this is in
and this is not this project site is above the delineation of the zoning district.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that the aquifer isn't up there.
Right.
It's just saying in terms of our zoning regulations, it is not within the district delineation of the aquifer protection overlay district.
And if those lines were to get moved in the future, or is the fact that I'm even asking that question, you kind of want to be like, that's a stupid question?
There's discussions. I just met with a representative this week about some additional standards for the northern half of the aquifer. They have not been hashed out. They maybe end up being completely different from what the southern portion is because there's different soils. And because it's a clay soil, there's different issues that may need to be addressed. So I'm in the process of looking at that, but I can't imagine that's going to be anything adopted anytime soon.
Right.
Not before this process is completed anyway.
And should, in the northern section, this site is within that northern section?
I can't say yes or no because the modeling, there are different models that show different things.
Okay.
I encourage you to go look at the BayPAC website, and there's a whole mapping section there, and you will see different delineations of the zone 2. I can provide you with the maps, but they're probably easier to read on the website.
Okay.
I would suggest that you send it to BayPAC and ask for their professional recommendation.
And can you guys get her the calculation?
I actually have copies if you want.
Great, okay.
And then if, I'll have Jess follow up with you, but just sort of generally, I think we'll probably ask you to revise your memo to include that you've reviewed those calculations too. Anything else? I think we are gonna finish up for tonight. At our next meeting, stormwater related?
Totally, and I just really want to give you the materials that I prepared.
Oh, you can always give us materials.
One thing that I really just want to point out during that stormwater discussion, Erica Flood, 6163 Parsons Street, that puddling that's going to happen, if you look They're directing it into my backyard, and I'm still waiting for an answer to the question. When my dry basement starts flooding, who's paying for it? That did not make me feel any better about that situation. So, I'll give you a copy. The other thing I wanted to point out is that when the fire happened, these are some of those maps. I don't know who makes copies. When that fire happened at the lost
The pressure
stop.
thing is really not stormwater related.
Okay, that's fine. There's
So-
an article in here. It blew a water main across town, so
We're definitely going to follow up on that with the fire chief.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here is that. I'm sorry. Oh, that's just enough copies. This is in there. I referenced it. There also should be a historical review that's done. And the BayPAC meets the first Tuesday of every month. I put that in my notes.
I have more than trust that Jess will
That's
take
fine.
care
So
of us
I
on
just
that.
want you to have that in your hands, and my concerns are there. Stormwater is one of them, but the historical makeup of the community also, and how these buildings fit. Recently, I met with Bonnie Parsons.
You're
and
now
that's
off
in there.
stormwater,
That's
but
fine.
thank you. There will be other public speak time on other issues in the future.
I do have one document from the watershed.
If you have
center on
documents,
stormage.
you can always, and you guys don't have to wait until meetings to provide documents. Anything that gets given to Barbara that's related to this, she's really great about emailing stuff out. So don't feel like you need to wait until the meeting to give documents. It's probably, better if you give it ahead of time, because then we can review it, and then if we have follow-up questions, or we can get a more considered response from Valley CDC and that sort of thing. You don't need to wait till the hearing to give us documents.
If you prefer it in an email, it's just the watershed recommendation for performance bond for storm drainage.
You can talk to Barbara when we're done about it, how the best way to disseminate it. If you only have one copy, you're going to have to give it to Barbara anyway, because we'll all need copies. So,
Based on the storm drain, can we get things that were mentioned, like it was mentioned, the hydraulic model of the site? Can the residents get that?
anything that we have, you guys can get. Hydraulic model of the site.
That's in the permit.
It's in the permit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The permit is online, the application.
Right.
So that's where it is, and yeah, everything that we have, you guys can get. Just talk to Barbara. So I think we're gonna finish up. Our next regular board meeting is April 24th at 6:30 Tuesday, and we have Barbara kindly left for all of us the agenda for that. And then we will next convene on this matter on May 10th, and it's gonna be at 7 o'clock, not 6:30. And
7-9.
we will be getting a presentation similar to the one on engineering that we had tonight on the peer review of the traffic study. And
Make a motion to continue.
yeah, no, I think I had one other thing that I wanted to say, but I'm not finding my piece of paper now. Where did I put it? Guess it wasn't that important. Right. So, one thing that we had talked to, when Edie first talked to us about, that was mentioned, that Jess is gonna be following up with the city attorney about, is the possibility of having a working session, with a representative from the ZBA and Edie and Valley CDC and planning, thank you. And anybody, was there anybody else? No. And I wanted to get a sense from folks whether we are feeling like that is something that would still be
I think so. I think
useful.
now that we've kind of aired what our thoughts
As we
and
know.
concerns are at this point, now's a chance to, time to sit down and let's start to do.
So Jess is following up. This is, the working session is something that has been done in the past. And we're following to make sure with the city attorney that it is still has his seal of approval. And ideally, we would, if, once we get to the end, the next meeting, we'll probably have a better sense of this, but I think right now, Edie and I were thinking that the time for that sort of working session would probably be between the May meeting and the June meeting if possible. So just wanted to put that out there. Obviously, we can't schedule it yet because we still need to clear it with the city attorney. But that I think is sort of the next step after the May meeting as far as where we're thinking, this is going to. So, and then, all right. Anybody want to move to continue the hearing?
I'll move to continue the hearing.
Excellent. Second. Right, to May 10th at 7 o'clock.
Make it official.
All in favor? Or,
Aye.
second. Who's second? I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for keeping us official, Barbara.
Okay.